Continuing with the halachos of Havdalah, so the next few halachos that Shulchan Aruch discusses are going to be in a case when a person does not have a lot of wine, and the question is what takes precedence over what. So the Shulchan Aruch says as follows: if a person does not have what to make Havdalah, so that means he does not have wine, or nor does he have beer or anything that would be included in Chamar Medina, so there's a question: is he allowed to eat before he makes Havdalah? We're going to see later on that on an ordinary week, one is not allowed to eat or drink before he makes Havdalah. But let's say a person does not anticipate that he's going to have at all. So, according to one opinion, if he's not going to have, he's allowed to eat right away. There's one opinion in the Gemara that's based on the Gemara says there's one Amora who, when he didn't have, he waited until the next day when he got wine. So, according to one opinion, if a person knows that he's going to have the next day wine, then he would be required to wait until the next day to make Havdalah, and he would not be allowed to eat until then. So those are the two opinions. Next. I'm sorry?
So what's the halachos?
So what's halacha? So if a person is able to, so really one should be strict, but if a person is weak and is not able, then he's allowed to eat right away.
Rabbi, if you haven't been able to do Havdalah, does Shabbat continue until you can do it? Or
So you can always say Baruch Ham. Well, first he's already said hopefully Havdalah during Tefillah, so that permits him in Achila. But you're right, that's a good point. So Shabbos is over with regard to Malacha. It's only a question of regard to eating, which a person normally has to hear and make Havdalah with the kos, and that's what it becomes relevant for. Okay, now let's say a person, the question is, let's say a person can either he has 1 cup of wine, so should he use it for Kiddush or Havdalah? What do you say? Why should he use it for Kiddush? On one hand, because it's more important, it's for sure Deraisa. However,
because if you have it for Kiddush,
yeah.
and it's possible that somehow you'll get it between brothers.
Oh, so you're saying, like by Silo, like you're betachlan that Hashem didn't provide you. That's a good, interesting idea. But in fact, the Shulchan Aruch says a person should use it for Havdalah. Why is that? Because we know that with Kiddush, a person can make Kiddush with bread, right? But when it comes to Havdalah, we said we cannot use it on bread, and therefore, if a person knows going into Friday night, he only has 1 cup of wine, so what he will do is he would make, use the wine save it for Havdalah, and make Kiddush on the bread. Okay, let's say a person only has, he doesn't have a lot of money, so he can either buy oil for Chanukah or wine for Kiddush. What goes first? Chanukah. Because Chanukah, the Gemara tells us, pirsumei nisa adif, to publicize the miracle of Chanukah is more important. There the Gemara is discussing, it takes precedence over lighting Shabbos candles, but the same would apply to Kiddush as well, says the Shulchan Aruch, and therefore one would use that money to buy Chanukah candles. Okay, next the Shulchan Aruch discusses what is the proper way of saying Havdalah. Should one be sitting or standing? Now, why would one be standing? So the Shulchan Aruch says one should be sitting, and the Ramah says no. Some people say you should stand. Now, what are the reasons each way? So the reasons why you would stand is because we're escorting the Shabbos out. So therefore, it's only fitting that a person would be standing. However, the reason why it would be preferable to sit is that we know that in order for one person to be able to fulfill the obligation for somebody, they have to be a unit, right? So let's say they're all standing, so perhaps we don't view them as all together because each one is, kind of doing their own thing. It's only when they all sit around the table that they become one group, and that's how they want to fulfill the other one. So the Shulchan Aruch, for that reason, says better that they all sit in order to facilitate one being able to be motzi, to fulfill the obligation of everybody else. And the Ramah says, no, better to stand. And if you're going to ask me how does one fill the other, it's no, the fact that they're all gathered around to hear Havdalah, that itself creates a shiur, that creates a combination, and that's good enough. Now, when we're saying Havdalah, a person should hold the cup in his right hand, because that's always more chashuv. However, when a person switches to the next bracha, to make a bracha on the candle or on the summon, so the rule is we always make a bracha. Whenever a person makes a bracha on something, it should be with his right hand. When you take up a glass of water to make a bracha on it, it should be with your right hand. So when you're making a bracha on the hadas, on the besamim, or on the candle, you should switch it to your right hand. However, don't put the cup of wine down, because the entire Havdalah is supposed to be said al hakos, with a kos. So you're supposed to switch it to your left hand, switch the kos to your left hand, say the bracha on the besamim, say the bracha on the eish, and then for the rest of Havdalah, you put the kos back in your right hand, and that's how Havdalah should be made. Now, we mentioned before that the custom is to recite Havdalah they're at shul, and that became the custom. However, one should have in mind, somebody who plans on making Havdalah when they get home should have in mind not to fulfill their obligation here, and that's what we assume, that a person, if they know that they're planning on making it, the assumption is he doesn't have to ask himself every time, did I have kavanah did I have in mind to fulfill my obligation or not. We assume that every person who plans on making Havdalah at home has a kavanah not to be motzi. And finally, the last halacha the Shulchan Aruch discusses the obligation of women. So the Shulchan Aruch says, according to one opinion, women are obligated to hear Havdalah. And then the Shulchan Aruch says, v'yesh mishcholek, there are some who argue. Meaning that the Shulchan Aruch brings two opinions whether or not a woman are obligated in Havdalah, and therefore says the Ramah, it is better that they do not recite Havdalah for themselves, rather they should hear it from men. Now, why would they be obligated and why would they not be obligated? So the reason why they would be obligated is, even though Havdalah is a mitzvah, Shuzman Grama, Havdalah is a mitzvah which is time-bound, right? Only on motzi Shabbos, that's its set time. And generally women are exempt. However, we know that there's an exception, and that is when it comes to Shabbos, since they're obligated in shiur Shabbos, they're obligated to, in all the commandments of Shabbos, and malachos of Shabbos, they're also obligated in Kiddush and Havdalah. So that would be the reason why they would be obligated. However, so then if you're going to ask me, so why wouldn't they be obligated? So the answer is, because perhaps who said Havdalah relates to Shabbos? Perhaps Havdalah is a halacha regarding to motzi Shabbos. And this halacha that they're obligated all Shabbos things only means that they're obligated in Shabbos things, not motzi Shabbos things. And therefore, according to that opinion, they're not obligated in Havdalah. Therefore, says the Ramah, they should not make Havdalah themselves. Rather, they should hear from others. Now, this is a little interesting because it seems like the Ramah is saying that they should not make it. Now, this raises the question because we know that although women are exempt from mitzvahs, escorting, time-bound mitzvahs, nevertheless, according to the Ashkenazim, they are allowed to make it. So that's why a woman, when it comes to Sukkot, she's allowed to make a brach on lulav, Sephardim won't, but according to Ashkenazim, they may. So, according to that, says the Bach, the woman would be allowed to it. However, there's one other thing. We saw before that the custom is for a woman not to drink from the Havdalah kos, for a number of reasons. So since the custom is for a woman not to drink the Havdalah kos, that's why, although it is technically they're allowed to bring the obligation upon themselves, but since the custom is specifically regarding the Havdalah not to drink the kos, that's why they should not make it themselves. But rather, they should hear it from a man. Now, where it becomes relevant is as follows. Let's say the husband already fulfilled his obligation, right? So generally we have a principle that even if I already fulfilled my obligation, however, if somebody else needs to hear the obligation, based on the concept of arvus, Kol Yisrael Arevim, we're all responsible for one another. So if you have an obligation, I have an obligation. However, that's only assuming that you have an obligation. So let's say a husband already fulfilled his obligation, and he comes home and his wife says, I didn't hear yet. So the question is he allowed to make Havdalah for her? Well, hang on. If we're concerned that perhaps she's not obligated, then he would not be allowed to recite Havdalah for her. And therefore, says the Mishnah, it would be better for her to make Havdalah for herself, right? It would be better for her to make Havdalah for herself than for him to put himself into a situation where he might be saying a bracha l'vatala, and in that case, her obligation to make Havdalah, or the chance that she's obligated to Havdalah, would trump this minhag of woman not making Havdalah. In such a case, she would make it on her own. But in all other cases, it's better for the husband to be motzi the way. Yeah.
So for some reason, if the woman was home and her husband was at home and had no sons, there's 3 daughters.
Yeah.
And the husband was in Jerusalem studying.
Yeah.
And what do you do now? You have 3 women. If you take the position that they're obligated to, let's say.
So then they could be made for each other. So in that case, it would be better. I'm sorry.
The mother would have to be the leader. You just said that sometimes they're not allowed to lead. If you take the position the woman can lead on Havdalah.
Yeah, no. So that's the general position.
Okay.
But in a case where there's nobody to be motzi them, then they would be able to make it for the.